Hello and welcome back to the Argyle HR Hiring and Retention Workforce Summit. My name is Vicki Lynn Brunskill with Argyle. It's great to have everyone joining us today. Just a couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience today. And any time during the event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, and those do include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. To ask questions throughout this session and all sessions, simply type into the Q&A chat and we will address your questions at the end of the session. And now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Rose Rogers, Chief Human Resources Officer at Vortex Industries. We are so excited to have Rose and our panelists with us for a panel discussion titled Talent Acquisition, a New Look at Hiring Strategies. Welcome, Rose. Over to you.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining. Such an important subject of talent management, acquisition, recruiting, and retention. And as mentioned, I'm the CHRO of Vortex Doors. So when I think about my career, my number one job is talent. And so now let me introduce our panelist, Carly.
Thank you so much. Carly Ackerman. I'm the Director of Customer Experience at Eightfold AI, a talent intelligence platform that supports the end-to-end talent lifecycle. Really excited to be here today and share a little bit of my perspective from the tech-enabled lens.
All right, Melissa.
Hey, my name is Melissa Frank. I'm the Director of Talent Recruitment at New York Public Radio, which is a public media organization in New York City. My background is in education recruiting before I moved on to media, and I've been in recruitment for about 15 years.
Thank you. And Shipla.
Hey, my name is Shilpa Kulkarni, and I'm a Senior Director of Tech Recruiting with Expedia Groups. All my career has been in tech recruiting. So before coming to Expedia, I worked at Facebook, now Meta, for many years, and before that at Microsoft. So anything related to tech recruiting probably is something that I'm passionate about, I can help with. So thank you for having me here.
Great, thank you. So let us get started. We do have some questions that we thought of that we would help drive it. So the first one, what are some effective and innovative ways that you've seen companies use technology to improve how they evaluate and fine-tune hiring needs? Shipla, why don't you tell us what you've been doing?
Awesome. And thank you, Rose. This has been, something that all recruiting teams across US, and I should say across globe, everyone is adapting. And the first thing that comes to my mind is artificial intelligence. Lots and lots of ways to use AI to automate tasks like screening the resumes or scheduling the initial interviews, or even finding out what the candidate's passions are. AI is a really very useful tool, and I feel that it will free up time for recruiters and sources to do more strategic partnerships or to build a relationship or give that human touch to the whole process. The second thing that I'm seeing more and more being used, and this is in the volume hiring nowadays, is use of predictive analysis. That means you see how the candidates are, how did they grow within their career, how did they grow in the projects, and then potentially use the predictive analysis tools to find out whether they are going to be really successful in the company, in the culture, in the given role that you will be offering them or they will be accepting within your company. And the third thing, obviously, going global. So technology is helping immensely. Now, look, we all are on Zoom talking to many, many people logging in from different locations. Getting right candidate is important, and so going global or going in various locations becomes equally important. So these three things, I feel that technology is of help, rather utmost help, to make us do the better recruitment every single day and even to provide a good candidate experience.
Thank you. Thank you. Carly, anything to add?
Yeah, I'd love to zoom in on the mention of AI. I'm a little bit partial to AI in the talent space, as you might imagine. But what really is exciting to me about this, not only the fact that we are here with an audience of HR leaders and we're ready and prepared to talk about AI without running for the hills. I think that's, step one is we're just excited that we're prepared to take it on. The potential of AI within the HR space is so huge. This technology is what's going to allow you to shift from hiring for experience to hiring for potential. So AI is going to afford you the opportunity to really look at insights related to skills and a candidate's ability to learn. And that means hiring can go beyond the resume, beyond the cover letter, even beyond the referral or the recommendation. So recruiters and hiring managers just have a better sense of what a candidate can do tomorrow rather than just what they're bringing with them today based upon their prior experience.
Great, thank you. Melissa, anything else that you'd like to share with the group?
Yeah, I mean, the panelists here are, come from, some more tech backgrounds than I have. So I'm working with smaller organizations, public media organizations where we might not have the level of resources to be able to implement some of these technologies. But I think coming down to basics when it comes to technology and ensuring that you have consistency in how you're pulling your reporting and sticking with those consistent measures, so you're able to measure how effective your recruiting is, even when we're talking about implementing AI or other new technologies into it, making sure we're measuring to see how effective those things are. And how effective even your sourcing techniques are, how effective DEI is on top of everybody's mind, how effective your DEI strategies are through pulling consistent reporting on your candidates as well, I think is something that's always important to talk about, even if it's not sort of the most new thing. But I think it's something that companies aren't always doing. And without measuring something, it's really hard to see how effective you are being with that technology or strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I think, for everyone, the panelists have really shared how important embracing technology is to go into measurements and growth and, just being able to recognize employees. So really great answers. One of the next questions is kind of two-part. How is data fueling hiring innovation? But then what challenges are related to data-driven hiring? So Melissa, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think the challenges sometimes lie in coming away from a human approach to recruiting. So as a recruiter, I see my job as building relationships, ensuring a very streamlined process, engaging candidates very effectively throughout even the smallest of touch points. And I think technology is amazing to measure how you're doing. And, as Carly was talking about, measuring the potential of an employee versus only seeing their experience. But I think it's equally as important to ensure that that human touch stays throughout the process. So using the technology in the background, but having the same lovely touch points along the way to make a candidate excited about your role, and making sure that they know that you're really interested in them versus making something very automated throughout the process. So I would say those are some of the challenges that sometimes come into play if a company is getting too data driven.
Okay, thank you. Carly?
Yeah, I think the data itself is the challenge, right? I think there's just so much of it at this point. So thinking about, from the perspective of an HR leader being asked to answer questions at the drop of the hat about their workforce, the data itself becomes incredibly unwieldy. And no matter how sophisticated the technology is that you're using, whether it's AI or some other form of technology that's data driven, it's only so good as the data that is being inputted into it. So having clean, usable, and current data and having a lot of data is really going to be paramount. I also think that connecting ROI, right? Like you're going to have to be able to defend some of the decisions that you're making, some of the investments that you're making, leveraging data. So companies that are doing this really well are the ones who are tying ROI to real business outcomes, not just recruiting outcomes, not just how quickly you or how much you can reduce the time to hire, but then taking it one step further and tacking that data to real business outcomes in terms of innovation, output, productivity. Those are the organizations who are really going to see the most bang for their buck in terms of the data that they're leveraging.
Great, thank you. Shipla.
Yeah, great points, Melissa and Carly, actually. So quality of data is, yes, supremely important. The way and both of you, yes, I completely agree that first off, we shouldn't be losing the human touch. Secondly, the accuracy, the quality of data, and the amount of data, basically, to make the decision. They both are supremely important. The plus side of data, assuming all of these boxes are checked, is a whole lot. Basically, you can find out which background or which certain skill sets have been, a good quality of hire for your company. Are there any consistent reasons for offer declines? Are there any specific set of candidates who are not successful in your company? Is it certain team in your company? Is it certain organization? Is it certain background these people are coming from? And you can build the training programs. You can actually do the internal trainings based on that data. The other thing I'm always amused by the set of data and how it is used is build those predictions for the next year. So what happened last year is pretty much gives me the picture of what is going to happen next year. But again, you require a certain amount of data for that. So plus one, because data is complex to collect, it's complex to analyze. But provided that if we start walking on this path, there are some really big fruits, as I said, the predictive analysis, success ratio, quality of hires, time to fill, the productivity, and even the candidate experience. So data is a base for building those metrics, which normally will fit to talent acquisition organizations. That's how I feel about the data fuel technology, if you want to say so.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Our next question is also a two-part. First part, what are the key challenges related to recruiting? And then what is working and where do you think companies make the biggest mistakes? Melissa, if I'll go ahead and kick off with you again.
Sure, happy to. So challenges sometimes can be very dependent on your industry or your company. Again, coming from a public media organization, a lot of the time the challenges are related to competition in the marketplace, right? Being competitive sometimes with compensation. Sometimes, and I think especially for a lot of tech-driven industries and firms, it could just be a lack of candidates in the marketplace for the skills that you are needing. But I think something that's really important, no matter what, is to ensure as a company, you understand really what your value proposition is. So for us, sometimes that isn't compensation. Sometimes that could be other things. For example, having a really flexible workplace, having a workplace that really values genuinely, not just kind of talks about it, that work-life balance. And so I think what really works when you are speaking with candidates and when you're bringing candidates through the process is to ensure that you understand as a company what your value proposition is, and they get a glimpse of that through all of the different pieces throughout the process. I think sometimes companies can make the mistake of not being clear on their company values or that value proposition, and that can sometimes lead to down the line a fit that isn't quite mutual.
Great, thank you. Carly, what are your thoughts?
I want to jump in on a comment that Melissa made around some of those hard to find skills in the market. I think that's where technology really stands to shine and support recruiting efforts. When you need a specific skill, It's much easier to find potential candidates for that role when you broaden the scope of what you're looking for based upon skills that you know will either propel somebody into that role quickly, or that if they have those skills that they can easily upskill into the role. So kind of broadening your funnel, so to speak, using the technology available to identify a broader talent pool, I think is really critical. But in terms of some of the key challenges, one that I think that will probably resonate a lot for folks, the world just continues to give us excuses to talk about how quickly things can change. So late 2022, early 2023, it's been no different. We've seen market disruptions that have led to reductions in force that were then followed by heavy recruiting efforts, right? Like it's more than an ebb and flow. It's kind of like a giant wave washing over us and then trying to retreat and figure out where we go from there. The organizations that have made more flexible, proactive workforce strategies, maybe they're tapping into contingent talent or gig workers. Maybe they're really monitoring market trends to understand that ebb and flow more effectively. Those are the organizations that were able to really contract and expand more nimbly than organizations that were relying heavily on more of that traditional talent planning strategy. So kind of leveraging the technology in a way that the market disruptions don't pose yet another challenge to recruiting, I think is certainly something that is more available to broader HR teams at this point.
Great, thank you so much. Shipla?
+1, Carly. I was literally thinking about the market tides. It goes up, then it comes down, and it's been challenging time, quite unpredictable. I'm just going to, kind of put a basic recruiter hat at this moment and lay out 2 or 3 things which constantly I have seen as a challenge, irrespective of the industry, irrespective of size of the company or the field that you are in. The first one, which I consistently feel and advocate for, is to have a very clear job description. Whatever it is, whichever company it is, you're hiring a salesman, you're hiring a CEO of a company, please state it out clearly, what you need, where you need it, how you need it. Secondly, one size doesn't fit all. Like, even though there is one requisition, you may have someone who is really great in their job, but does not fit into your, the square box of screening candidates. So know what it takes to hire a good talent. Is it one consistent screening method? Is it more personal interaction? Is it more meeting for a coffee and understanding your skills? Or is it just sending some random test to those candidates and find out if they are a suitable fit? So the second thing is personalize the initial screening method to find out who your purple squirrel is versus, putting out a wide net there. And the third thing is waiting on making hiring decisions for weeks. That actually is a big no-no for me, because if you know that someone is really great at their job, then there are 10,000 recruiters out there who know that someone is great at their job. So move through the process really swiftly. And these 3 things I consistently feel are important and are challenged throughout the recruitment process, irrespective of the company. And if we want to get better in any of the parameters of talent acquisition, be it productivity, candidate experience, the metrics, we need to get better at these 3 basic things.
Great, thank you. So, we're talking about key challenges to recruiting, and a question for the audience has come up. And Carly, how can we ensure we are inclusive in hiring practices?
Yeah, I think I was at a conference last week, and it was really interesting to hear Keith Sonderling, the chairman of the EEOC, talking about technology in this space. And what was really exciting to me was to hear somebody whose full-time job is to identify organizations who are improperly using technology and creating bias say, I want this technology to put me out of a job. So he's kind of representing both sides of the coin, right? We know that there are a lot of dangers when it comes to leveraging technology because of the bias it can create, but we also know the power of the technology in terms of eliminating and mitigating bias. So where I've seen technology really support an inclusive hiring slate is by removing any sort of indicator of who the person is from a personal perspective, right? We're masking names, we're hiding any sort of indicators of what gender or race might be. So what you're looking at is really the raw capability of the person, what they've done in the past, and more importantly, what they'd be capable of doing in the future, rather than introducing any sort of data that might trigger some sort of unconscious bias within the person who is reviewing the material. Obviously, at the end of the day, a human needs to make the final decision. And through the recruiting process, you'll get to know the person more effectively. But in terms of creating a funnel that is inclusive, technology is allowing us to automatically and automatically remove a lot of the information that might otherwise stop somebody from the get-go from being included in the funnel.
Great, thank you. Shipla, I know in your work, very technology driven, something else to add here?
When we build the inclusive funnel, the way Carly said, the second thing that comes in picture is having the inclusive interview panel. So it is super important that the panel has a different way of thinking or looking at the candidate or assessing the candidate. So as much as it is important to have the inclusive slate that is coming on site, it is important that we are making decisions which are unbiased. So at scale, there are these unbiased interview trainings, which I found supremely helpful, and having the all-inclusive panel. As we start building the slate, it is even important that the job descriptions company-wide that we built, internally or externally, should be free of any words that explain the gender, the race. So building inclusive job description is important. Building very cautious scale or the on-site slate for all candidates, diverse candidate, is important. And even more important that the company and the company executives are being trained on making those inclusive hiring decisions. So I think these 2, 3 things, 4 things, they will help us at least get started on the way. There is a long path that we need to build still to bring all this inclusive talent on board.
Thank you. Melissa, how about your thoughts on this important question?
Yeah, as Shilpa said in one of the last questions, coming back down to basics, I think is important here. When we're talking about an entire hiring process, for me, of course, Shilpa, it starts with the job description, but then after that, having an intake meeting with your hiring manager or the hiring team where you're discussing the process, where you are discussing the goals of your company, you are ensuring that you are setting a hiring process up front with your hiring manager so you know exactly what the process will be, who will be involved, what stages of the interview will be examining what, and ensuring that you are on the same page with the hiring manager. So then when you're having initial conversations with the candidate, they understand what the process is, and you are holding both yourself and your company accountable for what you set out at the outset of the process as far as the steps. Because sometimes what can happen is a hiring manager or a hiring team can get excited about a particular candidate and everything gets thrown out the window. And then you're not then offering an inclusive and equitable process for other candidates. So it really does start at the very beginning, before you even launch a role sometimes, in having these conversations. And as Shilpa mentioned, training for managers and for interviewers is so important. So they have the skills to be able to assess candidates in all facets, including anti-bias training that has to come in to be effective in this work.
Great, thank you. And while I've got you on the stage here, what do you think are the most important interview tips or techniques that you've seen work to assure a candidate is a good fit?
Yeah, I mean, it really does kind of go hand in hand with that last question. So Again, like training, there I don't think is anything more important than having training around proper interviewing techniques, and even ensuring, and I've heard this before when people kind of come into some of the panel interviews, which I think is definitely an important part of the process, they feel like they're coming up against a firing squad. So ensuring you're even training your managers and your panelists to be friendly, to make it a space where people feel comfortable. Because if people aren't feeling comfortable, your candidates aren't feeling comfortable, they're surely not going to be able to put their best foot forward, and you're not going to be able to get a really true view of that candidate in that interview process. So I think that's important, is setting the stage to make it comfortable for candidates. But again, coming back to the basics, behavioral interview questions, and ensuring that you have examples of things that the candidate has done that aligns to your job or your values or your industry or whatever you're looking for is so important. And as a recruiter, I am fairly involved in the panel interview process, so much so that I'm even coaching on the questions that they're asking. So if you don't have a lens as a recruiter into the interview, it's very hard to help add knowledge and skill into that interview process.
Great, thank you. Shipla, what are your thoughts?
So really what I feel is when you are interviewing a candidate, the candidate is interviewing you as well. It is not one-way process, and you are a representative of the company. So very basics that you come prepared for the interview. When you are interviewing someone, know what role, what questions, and what are you really assessing the candidate for. Be prepared to share your story, be prepared to share your experiences and why you are still working with the company, because you are a face of that company to a candidate who is going to go out and either say good things about the company or bad things about the company. So you have more at stake than the candidate. I always feel that way. Secondly, it is important that personalize the interview, be professional, be positive. It is very, very possible that as like a new grad, if you are a professional who did not interview from last 10, 15 years, and even nowadays you see that kind of candidates a lot who have been, working with one company 10, 15 years in tech field. Currently, there have been a layoff waves going on. So we have been talking to candidates who didn't even interview for 15, 18 years. It is important that you are making them comfortable, making them feel positive, and you are putting your best foot forward. You are a good listener, you are more organized, and you are prepared for the interview, and you are ready to provide specific examples, asking right questions, and even sharing your stories. So again, going back to the best candidate experience that you can provide is something you should absolutely be doing as an interviewer, and explaining the next steps too. So I feel these couple of basic things in addition to your interview questions will lead into great candidate experience and the hiring process.
Great, thank you. Carly, what about your thoughts?
Yeah, so I obviously have been kind of working in and around the recruiting space at Eightfold, but my history and background is in broader talent strategy. So my prior life before joining Eightfold, I was focusing on creating a perspective on what is a skills-based organization. I'm sure that a lot of folks on the call right now are probably either excited to hear that or rolling their eyes because it's been around for a while, and I'm not sure that we've been able to like really put our finger on what that means. But I'm still really passionate about the idea of organizations kind of shifting their talent practices to becoming more skills-based. So I say all of that because I think one really critical component of the hiring process that is very difficult to nail, and I would love for Shilpa or Melissa to call me out if I'm wrong about this, but trying to assess for what I think we all commonly refer to as soft skills. I don't love that name for them, but power skills, pivot skills, the skills that allow people to apply their hard skills in different contexts and really flex as a person. Those are just notoriously difficult to figure out if the person has it just over the course of a few interviews. So I did a little bit of homework because I've always just felt, this is really important, but I'm not really sure how to nail it in the interview process. And interestingly enough, if anybody out there is an Economist subscriber, there was a recent article that talked about this. So I'll share a little bit of that. There's some research coming out of Rice University that found that people who can accurately gauge which members of a team wield influence have the power skill, so to speak, of status acuity. And there have been some additional research done where ability to identify somebody's status actually has a lot of associations and adjacencies to other power skills. So being able to accurately read a room is a really great sign that somebody has those other power skills like influence, communication. So something to consider. And then some other, you can just do the simple things of asking how the candidate interacted during the recruitment process with other members of the team. How did they treat the sourcer? How did they treat the scheduler? If it was an in-person meeting, how did they treat the person who brought them into the room, right? I think it's just really important to make sure that not only is this person going to be a cultural fit for you, but that they'll be able to last a long time, knowing that in the world that we live in, the job that they're hired for is probably not the job that they're going to be in 1 to 2 years down the line.
Great, thank you. It's funny, Carly, because I wanted to move away from soft skills myself. And so now I'm using agilities, like critical thinking, you think of like being agile and being able to do it. So I'm, using agilities. But, while I have you on, we have a really interesting question from the audience, and it's really a technical one. My team has been utilizing AI in coordination with their ATS, but we are still looking at ways to integrate new AI capabilities such as ChatGPT. What do you see in regards to ChatGPT and new AI capabilities for recruiting and hiring moving forward, and how will it alter hiring strategies in the near future?
I wish I could get ChatGPT to do my job for me. I still haven't figured it out. But that said, definitely a lot of applications. Before I say anything about that, though, my first caveat is be careful, right? ChatGPT is not yet regulated. And if you've been following what's been going on in Congress for the past couple of days, even the founder of ChatGPT is saying we need to regulate this stuff because it's dangerous. So within the recruiting space, especially if you're in a highly regulated industry, just be careful and make sure, as with any sort of tech adoption, that you're making sure from a compliance and regulatory perspective that you're comfortable with it and it's explainable not only to the people using it, but to the end user, the folks who are impacted by it, the candidates, the recruiters. So that's my first caveat. But in terms of what we're seeing out there in the market, a lot of AI platforms are introducing something similar to the Copilot that Microsoft introduced for a recruiter. So think about your job description. If you need to create a job description, you can do it in seconds instead of hours or weeks, requiring back and forth communication and alignment internally. So job descriptions are definitely going to be sped up with ChatGPT, as well as just kind of navigating the recruiting process. If all of the data is in one place, having conversational AI kind of help guide the identification of candidates, the process of doing that. We're seeing more and more of that come online. But again, with the caveat that a lot of the vendors who are introducing ChatGPT powered functionality are giving their clients the opportunity to opt out because it still is not regulated.
One thing to add in there is ChatGPT. Where I use ChatGPT is getting the data of the location. So say, for example, if you are hiring someone who is working in marketing or someone like data scientists, ChatGPT told me that there are the highest number of data scientists in Austin. So and that data was pretty accurate because we at Expedia, we do pull data from various resources to build our own talent acquisition strategy as to which locations we want to build for certain skill sets where we want to grow the team. And ChatGPT and Bard, both AI tools, they actually gave me pretty accurate data, even though when I compared them with each other and with the manual data that my data analytics team provided. So for that, yes, I would say 60% accuracy in the job description, because they did not show the inclusivity, by the way. They just built the job description. So for the vanilla skills, like building job description, building the search strings, giving you the data per location, that do provide a help, but it would not replace the human accuracy. I should put it out there, and it's not regulated.
Great, thank you. Taking another audience question, Melissa, it can be challenging to have a high volume of candidates per requisition. What are your thoughts on assessment screenings? Are these effective in hiring the best candidate fits?
Yeah, I mean, that's a difficult question. It sort of depends on how high your volume is and how quickly you want to whittle down that candidate pool. For me, I typically steer clear on an initial assessment as sort of first interaction, because I think you can very easily knock people out of your candidate pool that would be a great fit. So I hate to say it, and I've worked in some pretty high volume places. It really comes down to getting through those applications. There are definitely ways you can whittle them down quickly depending on your requirements. So, for example, if you're requiring certain bits of information and they don't have it, you can knock them out very quickly within seconds of screening. But if you're using like basic assessment questions that are not super skills based, maybe it's an experience, number of years of experience, things like that, that might be okay to knock people out. But having an assessment go out as a first interaction, that's not something that I prefer as a recruiter personally. I think you could lose out on a lot of great candidates that way.
Great, thank you. So we've got another question here, Carly, really for you and I, that we mentioned not a fan of the term of soft skills, and to ensure that I'm aware of potential concerns with certain terminology. What are we hearing about this long used term that may warrant assigning it to a new name? So I'll kind of go first. So, for me, soft skills are the hard stuff. So it's funny that they call them soft skills, because it is literally the hardest competency for any aspiring leader or leader to have. And so I do use soft skills, but the reason I'm sort of rebranding under agilities is there are a lot more assessment capabilities where I can have people take even self-assessments of sort of how they show up in critical thinking or communication and so forth, where I just felt soft skills were too broad. Carly, what was your thoughts on soft skills?
It's very similar. I find that soft skills not only are the hard thing to get right, I also find that they're incredibly important to be successful long term. So the word soft just kind of connotes that they're not as important as hard skills. So trying to use a different terminology to help really elevate the fact that these are the most important skills. Not to mention I'm a subscriber to Josh Bersin.
Yes.
And he definitely has pushed us away from soft skills. I think power skills is his terminology for it.
Yeah, thank you. Shilpa, you talked a lot about training, and so one of the participants was asking, do you have any suggestions for virtual interview training for managers?
Yes. Too many. So first thing I would really ask is, when you are in person, I would say you have kind of that upper hand, because you are meeting with the candidate in person. You are able to figure out from the interaction where the candidate is, like in terms of, are they feeling comfortable? They are completely in the interview process. They are not. When you are virtually interviewing someone, you are bound by the time. Secondly, you are there just to finish, certain assessments in the certain given certain time period. What I would say is, for any virtual interview, it is super important that you get trained on, first off, the candidate getting into the process, first of getting candidate onto the same page that you are in. And secondly, as I said, the all-inclusive process. So there are two trainings that I would highly recommend. First is unbiased interview training. The second one is how to be an interviewer. So both trainings are, there are multiple learning platforms which provide these trainings, and they will help you get more influential interactive interviewer. So what that means is basically you're explaining the role, you're explaining the company, you're explaining and asking very clear questions. You're prepared with the follow-up questions and or explanation, and you are providing candidate an inclusive experience throughout the interview. And it is as simple as, you're providing the example and you are calling out the gender. For example, he said this, she said this, versus saying they said it. Or you are giving a very specific example of your company, which may or may not be related to the candidate or the background that they are coming from, and to which they do not feel that they are connected or benefiting from it, or asking very vague questions. So these two, yes, for the virtual interview are must-haves. And what I would suggest is you have some good interviewers and you have some trainee interviewers. So never ever have any interviewer just go online and start interviewing before shadowing and reverse shadowing and training the interviewer on your companies. So normally I go with 5-5-5. What that means is you prepare 5 times, you get shadowed by a seasoned interviewer 5 times, and someone reverse shadows you and provide you the experience 5 times before you go on doing your interview independently. And that has been helped so far.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Melissa, this is a really interesting question. We're really struggling to find ways to differentiate our organization to improve candidate attraction. Please share some ways you have seen companies assure that they stand out.
Yeah, I think it comes back to something that we talked about a little bit earlier. You have to know what your company's value proposition is, and you should be highlighting that in every place that you are front-facing candidates, whether that's job descriptions, whether that's your website, whether that's initial conversations. You have to know you have to start off by knowing what exactly your company is offering in terms of the life that it will bring them, the values that your company holds, and making sure you're highlighting that. I think that is then again, you are ensuring a mutual match from candidates that are being attracted to your company and candidates that are a good fit for you. So I would say making sure you are stringing that value proposition along in all of your interactions is certainly a best practice.
I'd like to jump in on this one as well. I think we also mentioned personalization earlier, personalization of the process, and that starts from the first time they visit your career site. If they have to jump through a million hoops to apply, the likelihood of them getting to the end of that application is slim to none. So trying to streamline the application process as much as possible, and making it simple enough that, we talk about, we often talk about visit ratios, right? Folks who visit the site, how many times they're visiting the site. Let's talk about how many times they visit the site in relation to how quickly they apply. Ideally, you only want them to visit once. They shouldn't have to come back. So creating that kind of personalized and very easy experience from the get-go, I think is really critical.
Thank you. So we have come to the end of our time, and really we want to thank the audience, such great participation. Our panelists are amazing, so much insight, so much learning today. And now I'd like to hand it back to Vicki Lynn to close us out.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carly, Melissa, Shilpa, and Rose for a fabulous panel discussion. We've already gotten good feedback on it, so it's nice to hear that everyone's really loving all of your experience. Thank you for sharing it today. I also want to thank everyone for joining us today and let you know that this session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. Thank you again to a fabulous panel.